guys, and welcome back to my channel and today's video. So in today's video we're going to talk about palettes that doesn't give me FOMO. And if you don't know what FOMO is, it stands for fear of missing out. And I don't have any fear of missing out on these palettes. But before we hop into my palettes that I wanted to share with you guys today, I would really love it if you would subscribe. I am a cruelty-free YouTuber and I upload 5 to 7 times a week. The first palette I wanted to talk about comes from Urban Decay, and Urban Decay is a brand that I have not tried a lot of products from. I recently decluttered my Urban Decay Naked 2 palette, and then I only have their bronzer, and their bronzer I'm not loving because it is way too red. So I only have 2 products from them, or had. I don't know, there is something about Urban Decay that makes me feel like, oh my god, this is a hip brand, this is a cool brand, but at the same time I never purchased from them. And they recently came out with their Born to Run palette, which looks like this. I'm not saying that it's a ugly palette. I actually think that this is one of their best palettes they have come out with in a long time, but it's just not a palette that caters to my makeup needs. I also feel like there is a pretty good dupe out there, and it's from Colourpop, and it's their collaboration that they did with Makeup Shayla. And then I'm not saying that Makeup Shayla and Colourpop took inspiration from Urban Decay, or that Urban Decay took and stole the Colourpop design, but it is a similar palette and they came out almost at the same time. So I am not saying that one another copied each other, but I'm just saying that there is a more affordable dupe out there on the market, and Colourpop actually has some really amazing formula when it comes to their eyeshadows, in my opinion. And I don't know about this Urban Decay palette, I just feel like there are few colorful mattes, or mattes that I would like to work with. A lot of their shimmers is actually shades that I would prefer having mattes, and I don't have any fear of missing out on this palette. The other palette comes from Juvias Place, and if you are known to my channel, you guys know that I love Juvias Place shadows, formula, palettes, everything about Juvias Place I just love. I have almost all of their palettes, and I've actually done a series on my channel which is where I talk about which Juvias Place palettes is best for you, and I will link it up here so you can go ahead and check it out if you are interested. But they recently came out with their Warrior palette, and I had no desire to get that palette. That palette is pretty. I think that it's an amazing palette for Juvias to have in their collection, because they have come out with a bunch of palettes that doesn't really look like this. So I feel like it's a good palette to have in their collection, as I said, but I just don't really feel like it's a palette for me that will suit my needs. I would, however, get this if it had more mattes and fewer shimmers. I would love for it to have 7 mattes and 2 shimmers, or even 6 mattes and 3 shimmers. But this palette has 6 shimmers and 3 mattes, and I feel like I would get almost the same looks out of it. I am not into buying a palette full of shimmers, especially not with these types of shades. I prefer, when I'm doing a warm neutral eye, that I want to do something champagne-y or even a light pink on my eye or my eyeballs, like my lids. But I would not reach for this palette to use a bunch of bronzy shades. That's just not really what I do with makeup. 2 palettes from Colourpop that I have no fear of missing out on is actually their Fortune and Fame palette. These palettes came out when Colourpop celebrated their 4th year anniversary. They had had their company for 4 years, and they came out with these 2 palettes. And I was hoping for these palettes to be colorful, to suit the packaging when it comes to the color scheme, but one of their palettes had some really neutral tones, which I can understand that they came out with, just because of the fact that they had not really released a palette like that. And I know that they said that it had a lot of cool tones, but in my eyes it actually looked very neutral and not really cool toned. But I can understand that other people would like a neutral palette. It's just not something that I would like to get. And then the other palette was really warm. It had a bunch of pink shades. They actually claimed to have launched a pink and purple palette, which I don't agree with. Yes, the palette had a pink, it also had a purple, but it wasn't a pink and purple palette. The Elements of Surprise palette is way more purple and pink than this palette is. And I just don't feel like this is a palette that I would reach for if I had it in my collection, and I would not miss it if I decluttered it. The next palette I'm going to talk about is from Anastasia Beverly Hills, and this is a palette that is no longer available for purchases, and it's the collaboration that they did with Mario. Mario is a very famous makeup artist, and I know that a lot of people loves this palette. They want it to come back. A lot of people actually look up to Mario, and I admire that. But the palette for me was just not something very interesting. It wasn't really shades that I use. This is a palette I wouldn't even look twice at if I saw it in a store. I would just look at it and then kind of move on. It's just not a palette that I have ever found to be very inspiring, and I don't get why it got so much hype. I can definitely understand that Soft Glam got a lot of hype from Anastasia Beverly Hills because it was such a classic, beautiful palette. That is still a palette that I really want to get, but this palette was just not that for me. I am so happy that the people that really wanted to get their hands on this palette got their hands on it, but I would be honest and say that if I got this palette, I would probably have used it once and then never again. Another palette that I wanted to talk about comes from Kylie Cosmetics, and it was the collaboration that she did with her mom. Now, I do have to say that I loved the packaging that they did. I really did. I thought that the packaging was outstanding. I thought that this was the best collaboration that she had ever done when it came to packaging once again. But just talking about the eyeshadow palette, it was just not an eyeshadow palette for me or my taste. I actually thought that this was a palette that, you know, I think that the palette was needed on the market because it was very cool tone. My mom is the same. She prefers her cool tone browns. Whenever I want to do something brown, I always want to stick to the warm tones. I know that I'm super basic and boring when I say that, but it's the truth. Also, I did hear that the palette was lacking in quality. It was just not great. The blendability wasn't there, and the mattes that actually were in the palette, there were only 4 mattes in the palette, and the mattes were black, and then there was a nude, and then you had 2 browns to play with, and I feel like I would never use the nude. I cannot get that many different looks with 4 mattes where one is black and one is a setting shade for people of my skin tone. Let's talk about Natasha De Nonna. I don't own anything from Natasha De Nonna, but she came out with the Tropical palette, and that is a palette that I wish that she would have made like a mini and only had the few shades that she had in the last row as the mini. Then I would definitely get that palette because those shades were stunning. They were totally perfection. We had a purple, we had 2 blues, and then we had 2 greens. That was really unique. But I would not spend $150 or $129, I think it was. A lot of the shades actually looked the same. We did have a red, we had a darker brown, we maybe had some pinks. But they are just lighter shades that doesn't really suit my need. I like bold, bright shades. So that is a palette that I would not get any FOMO of, but I would love for her to make a mini of that and only release the last row. The last palette I'm going to talk about is from Give Me Glow. I have said before that I don't support their brand just because of the fact that they had really bad customer service, but I gave them an extra shot and said that, you know what, everyone can have a lot on their slates, so I'm gonna give them another shot. And that email discussion was one of the weirdest things I've ever done in my life. Anyway, they released a palette that was called Summer Vibes, and that palette had me on a grip the first time I saw it, but then I started to analyze it, and I was like, yeah, no, this is not for me. I love the turquoise shade that they had, turquoise shade that they had. I also really love the watermelon shade. I love that shimmery, almost also turquoisey shade. My God, that is a hard word to say. But when I started to analyze this, I saw that there were so many brown shades, and I felt like if I'm gonna get this palette, I will end up not really touching all the palette. I would almost only touch maybe 4 or 5 shades. I also didn't like the price. It was $54, and when I order from the US, I also always have to pay taxes, and then shipping always comes. There's not a lot of companies that have free shipping to Europe, which I totally understand, but it just adds up to the price. I don't know, I just felt like that palette wasn't really my cup of tea. I would rather have preferred for them to do smaller pans and then released it at a lower cost. I know that I rave about Juvias Place all the time, and they also have really big pans, but the difference is that they have really good prices. So I feel like it's totally fine that they have big pans. I don't mind it because the price is so good anyway. So for me, this is just not really a palette that I would miss or even get FOMO of. So I'm really happy that I didn't end up getting either of these palettes, and you will probably not see any one of these palettes on my channel ever. Please let me know which palettes you don't have a FOMO of missing out on. That sounds so weird, but I mean, please let me know which palette you don't have a fear of missing out of. I would love to hear from you guys. You know, I love chatting with you. If you did like this video idea, please give me a like. If you didn't like it, give me a dislike. And also don't forget to subscribe. I would really appreciate it. It really helps me out a lot. But that was all for me today. I will see you in my next video. Bye!